staying on the subject of the aftermath of Kevin McCarthy being ousted yesterday, pretty historic moment. The Republican Party is just crumbling, imploding, going up in flames. And we've talked about kind of those who were supportive of or are less aggravated at this happening, what they've been saying in their response. We looked at Kevin McCarthy's response. We look at people saying that Donald Trump should be the Speaker of the House for some reason. And now I have for you a look at the people who have been upset by Kevin McCarthy being ousted and are really mad at the Gaetz part of the party. And we start with Mike Lawler, who is seen as a moderate Republican, went on CNN and had this to say.
I think there needs to be a reckoning within the conference. There needs to be accountability for the 8 individuals who selfishly upended our House majority and put their own interests above the country, above the conference, and above the institution behind us.
What does accountability look like?
To me, in my personal opinion, they need to lose their committee assignments, and there needs to be consideration as to whether or not they're even part of the conference.
Remove them from the conference altogether, from the party in the House. Wow. And we will see if a reckoning will take place. The history, at least in recent years, of the party is anytime the hardliners cross a line, the MAGA part of the party slaps around the other side. You'll hear bold proclamations like Kevin McCarthy saying all the things he said about Trump in relation to January 6th, and then quickly realizing that's not what the base wanted and flying out to Mar-a-Lago and being hunky-dory with Trump again. Likely, I'd predict they won't actually have a reckoning and they will bend the knee. And that's the characteristic of this part of the party that allows for MAGA to be so powerful and so in control, unfortunately. Then you have a former advisor to Paul Ryan, who was also at one time the Speaker of the House and a Republican. And this is Brendan Buck saying something very true, but hilarious to hear from a Republican.
We are not right now fit for governing. We are a party much more made for being in the minority. We like to vote against things. My whole issue with all of these folks is their problem is not really with the Speaker of the House. It wasn't with Kevin McCarthy. It wasn't with Paul Ryan or John Boehner. These guys just don't like the realities of governing. We are not.
It's so true. So many of the things they were upset about when it came to Kevin McCarthy weren't the reasons we would be. But instead, really, what they said was kind of the crossing the line for Kevin McCarthy was his cooperation with Democrats to keep the government funded. A basic responsibility of governance, funding the body that you serve with it. And that was the red line for these hardliners. And that very much reveals exactly what we've been screaming for a long time over here on the left and getting ignored by these same Republicans, which is these people aren't serious about governing, getting things done, following through with basic steps of governance to make sure that the American people benefit the most that they can from their elected officials. And instead, it's about political stunts. Everything's never good enough, and you're never hardline enough, and you're never pro-Trump enough, and you're never obstructionist enough. And that type of ideology, yes, will cause mayhem and embarrassment time and time again for people like Kevin McCarthy and the party as a whole. Then you have former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, who is cuckoo, but had this to say.
96% of the Republicans voted for McCarthy. 4% voted against him. From my position as a longtime Republican activist, they're traitors. All 8 of them should, in fact, be primaried. They should all be driven out of public life. What they did was to go to the other team to cause total chaos. We ought to be focusing on Biden. We ought to be focusing on the economy. We ought to be focusing on the border. Instead, you're going to get a week or 10 days.
You know what's interesting? Marjorie Taylor Greene, when clips circulate of her praising and being fascinated with and believing in Q from not that long before she got elected into Congress, we hear nothing. Whatever. That was a long time ago. Lauren Boebert has all of her issues. Matt Gaetz even. All of his issues before now. And they're fine. This is when they lose their mind. Newt Gingrich is fine with this hardcore part of the party when they're perpetuating lies about our elections because he believes those or pretends that he does. He's fine with Trump's attempts to, and this supported by much of the party, overthrow our democratic process to install himself the president. But ousting Kevin McCarthy, that is when they become traitors for Newt Gingrich. Flawed priorities there, Newt. I always thought it was, what did I used to think? Newt Gingrich. That's what I thought it was for a long time. Newt. Then the same interview here.
Therefore, you know why they did it? Because ultimately Matt Gaetz, who hates, let's be clear, he hates Kevin McCarthy, was determined
no doubt about it.
to find a way to get to today.
Let me be very clear.
And I think it's disgraceful, and I hope they expel him from the conference.
It reminds me of all the threatening comments from Madison Cawthorn, all of the needlessly violence-provoking among his followers comments, all of his lies about numerous subjects. And none of that pushed the establishment over the edge for him. It was the bizarre storytelling about parties and orgies and cocaine that Madison Cawthorn brought forward. That's when you saw the Republican Party get really mad at him and eventually, it seemed, shove him out of the party. Again, flawed priorities. Then you have a Fox News correspondent also making a similar admission that we heard earlier.
The Republican Party today just can't govern. Nancy Pelosi, with a 5-vote majority, she was able to govern. The Democrats have become the party of discipline, and the Republicans have become the party that lacks discipline. And the reason for that is this internal clash. You've got a Republican base that does want to shut it down, that does want to stop funds to Ukraine, that is angry, that wants to do something about the debt. So they cheer for Matt Gaetz because he's given them the speech they want to hear. But then when it comes time to vote, he cannot deliver the votes that he needs to get anything done.
Exactly right. We have to make, and for Democrats it is, but across the board, we have to figure out how for Republican voters to make cooperation and actual serious governance sexy again. Because now the sexiest thing, the coolest thing is just a speech that your followers can retweet. It's just these grandstanding type moments that are so likable for so many people, especially in the MAGA base. And that's what Trump was. Many of them don't exactly know what the specific policy difference is that they like with Trump and hate about Biden, but the vibe, the speeches, the owning of the libs, these abstract concepts, that's what makes them love Trump so much. I ask when I go on the ground to rallies, a lot of these Trump supporters, what it is they like about Trump, or I'll ask them specific policies that Trump says he wants to implement, like the execution of drug dealers. And so many of them didn't even know that's something Trump was saying. Because it's not about the policy. It's not about actual governance. It's about the aesthetic. It's about the rhetoric and the attacks and the political posturing, the political stunts. That's really what it is that attracts so many people. And that makes it really hard once those people who are supported by a base such as that become so powerful. It's hard to have an effective governing party. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show and get a bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.